Hello everybody. Welcome to another session in the Viswaprajna's channel. In case you have not already subscribed, and please go ahead and do so. So today we are going to start the reading of a very interesting book. The author of the book is a gentleman named John Kenneth Galbraith. He's a world-renowned macro and policy economist, basically, and he had a very colorful and storied career. Uh, being a professor at Harvard, as well as being the economic advisor to many governments and administrations. A lot of people feel that he should have won the Nobel Prize, or he should have been honored with the Nobel Prize. But nevertheless, he did not get the Nobel Prize itself, but he was given many awards, basically. Right? He's one of the few people that won the Officer of Order of Canada, which is the highest civilian honor, as well as the Presidential Medal of Freedom from the United States, basically, as well as Lomonosov Gold Medal that is given to very eminent people from Russia, basically. Right. So you can see how much he influenced. From an academic career standpoint, he was a professor at Harvard University, Princeton University, and University of California at Berkeley. Um, he's no more. He passed away on April 29th, 2006, incidentally, about 19 years before. April 29th was yesterday. And very interesting that we are starting reading one of his very key books that he has written. So the book he has written is called A History of Economics, the Past as the Present. So today what we are going to do is, and I'm not going to bore you with all kinds of details about the author in one go. So we'll talk a little bit more about his ideology, his methodology, and everything as we read the book and as we try to understand what he's trying to tell us. But nevertheless, what we are looking at is somebody who is an exponent and a very deep thinker in economics, and what his ideas were of what economics was before and what economics is today, and from a historical perspective, as well as what in the present context, what it means, the world economy, right? So with that said, let's get going. Siksharth and Garu, if you want to start the reading. So the first chapter in the book, so I'll just quickly go over so let me quickly share, and I'll go over the table of contents. And again, depending on how quickly or how comfortably we are able to read through it, we could potentially go to a summary level presentation in the future. But nevertheless, for today, we'll just do the for the landscape itself, basically, right? We will we'll do the full reading today. Sir, are you able to see this?
Not yet, sir.
No.
Yeah, it's loading, sir. Yeah, got it, sir.
It's coming? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let me quickly go through the table of contents for the benefit of our viewers, and then we'll start looking at the landscape. So here, chapter 1 is a look at the landscape. Chapter 2 is after Adam. Then the chapter 3, the enduring interim, the merchants and the state, the French design, the world of Adam Smith. So as you know, Wealth of Nations is a very famous book by Adam Smith. Whoever is an economics graduate knows, or whoever has been introduced to economics formally knows that Adam Smith, the Wealth of Nations, was a very key milestone in the understanding of economics, world economics. Refinement, affirmation, and the secrets of revolt, the great classical tradition around the margins. Great classical tradition 2, the mainstream. Previous chapter was 1, 2. Chapter 3, the great classical tradition. Part 3, the defense of the faith. Chapter 9, the grand assault. Chapter 11. Chapter 12, the separate personality of money. Right. This is a chapter that, at least for me, it was greatly influential, because until then, I had a different perspective on what money was, frankly, right? And then after reading this book, my perspective changed quite a bit. Chapter 13, American concerns, trade and trust, enriched and the rich. Chapter 14, Completion and Criticism. 15, The Primal Force of the Great Depression. The Birth of the Welfare State. Chapter 16, John Maynard Keynes. Right. Again, anybody who knows economics knows that Keynesian economics is a specific framework that economics use. Right. Some economists don't like it. Some people they swear by it. So he gets into the details of it. Affirmation by Mars, High Noon, Twilight and the Evening Bell, The Present as the Future, Part 1, Present as the Future, Part 2. Right. So very long book, fascinating book, lot of interesting concepts. So without much delay, we'll get into it. Sikshardin Garu, over to you.
Yeah,
Sir,
thank you, sir. Sir.
did you want to say anything? A few words of introduction or any commentary?
No, let's get into the detail. Anyway, the detail now Shiksha will anyway tell.
Yeah, perfect, sir. Perfect. Thank you.
I
SK
did
Garu
not,
again.
did not hear of this fellow until
Yeah,
today. The other people I know, which you speak.
right, sir. So again, I didn't introduce the panelists. Sorry. So we have Lawyer Garu present,
Go ahead.
SK Garu, the usual panelist. So I just skipped to the content, but SK Garu is here as well as Sikshardin Garu. Sikshardin Garu, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you for that introduction about the book and also the author and the contents of the book. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to read this book on your channel. So, guys, let's go into the reading. Chapter 1 says, the name of the chapter is A Look at the Landscape. So, it goes as there can be no understanding of economics without an awareness of its history. In the academic world, this is acknowledged. Yet, the history of economic ideas has not been a popular or always rewarding field of study, and the reasons are not hard to find. There are many books on the subject of no slight scholarly accomplishment. All economies owe their authors a major debt. But in searching for academic excellence or in protecting against professional criticism, even the best scholars have spread themselves widely over the important and also the expendable. They cannot have it said that this point or that made by Adam Smith or David Ricardo or Karl Marx was missed. In consequence, the really controlling ideas, right or wrong, have frequently been lost in the mass. What continues to be of interest or relevance in our time has been obscured. And there is a yet more serious problem. Much and perhaps most of this writing has assumed that economic ideas have a life and development of their own. Progress in the subject matter is made in the abstract. One scholar shows a compelling talent for innovation, and others amend and improve on his work, all without close reference to the economic context. In fact, economic ideas are always and intimately a product of their own time and place. They cannot be seen apart from the world they interpret. And that world changes is indeed in a constant process of transformation. So, economic ideas, if they are to retain relevance, must also change. In the last 100 years, the great corporate enterprise, the trade union, depression and war, increasing and increasingly dispersed affluence, the changing nature of money, and the new and enhanced role of the central bank, the declining role of agriculture with the counterpart of urbanization and growth of urban poverty, the rise of the welfare state, the newly assumed responsibility of the government for overall economic performance, the emergence of socialist states, have all dramatically altered, even revolutionized economic life. As the subject matter of economics has changed, so necessarily has the subject. But at best, change in economics has been reluctant and reluctantly accepted. Those who benefit from the status quo resist change, as do economists who have a vested interest in what has always been taught and believed. These are matters to which I will return. Further, it must be said, much past writing on the history of economic ideas has been aggressively dull. There are a significant number of learned men and women who hold that any successful effort to make ideas lively, intelligible, and interesting is a manifestation of deficient scholarship. This is the fortress behind which the minimally coherent regularly find refuge. The foregoing paragraphs will suggest
I,
my purpose in
I
this.
just want to
Yes,
stop
sir.
you here and how he has used language to absolutely uh, decimate some of the people who refuse to innovate or refuse to think about new ideas, right? What is
Right,
the
sir.
aggressively dull or something like that?
Exactly, sir. Exactly. Aggressively dull, deficient scholarship,
Minimally coherent,
minimally coherent. Yeah, yeah, right, sir.
right? Right, sir.
Right, sir. So, the foregoing paragraphs will suggest my purpose in this history. I seek to see economics as a reflection of the world in which specific economic ideas have developed. The ideas of Adam Smith in the context of early trauma of the Industrial Revolution, those of David Ricardo in its later, more mature stages, those of Karl Marx in the era of unbridled capitalist power, those of John Maynard Keynes as a response to the unrelenting disaster of the Great Depression, where, as before, the rise of capitalism or in the subsistence economies of our own time, there was or is little that is interesting and even less to be discovered in economic life. I accommodate to this fact. Economic ideas are not very important when and where there is no economy. I am not averse, on occasion, to peripheral detail in the development of economic thought if it adds in an interesting way to the story. But I am principally concerned to isolate and emphasize the central idea or ideas of the specific author, school, or time, and to focus above all on those which have a continuing and modern resonance. That which was transitionary, I try scrupulously to ignore, as also many scholarship, as also any scholarship in the mainstream that did not greatly alter or deflect that stream. Because this is a history of economics and not merely of economists and their thought, I go beyond the scholars and scholarship to the events that shaped the subject, and as necessary to the events that shaped the history of economics when there were no economists. The last century in the United States, as I will tell, was a time of intense economic discussion of banking and banking policy, money and monetary policy, international trade and tariff policy, but until well into its last decades, there were almost no economists to lead or even to participate in that discussion. To confine myself in this history to formal economic expression would be to ignore a great and sweeping current in the flood of economic ideas. I have said that in the past, and the writing on this subject, or much of it, has been dull, sometimes ostentatiously obscure. I cannot think this necessary. The central ideas and their context are alive with interest. They have retained mine for over half a century, since I first encountered them in 1931 at the University of California at Berkeley under the guidance of two persuasive scholars, Leo Rogin and the stately Carl C. Plen. I would like to think that they can be as absorbing to others, nor do these matters challenge understanding. As I have urged on earlier occasions, there are no useful propositions in economics that cannot be stated accurately in clear, unembellished, and generally agreeable English. I must now say a word on the practical uses of history. History such as this. The claim that I make is one that should be made with care. As economics is practiced, all will agree it is obsessively concerned with the future. Every month in the United States, men and women of assumed wisdom fan out over the Republic to give their views on the economic prospect, as also on the social and political outlook. Thousands turn out to hear them. Business executives or their companies pay heavily for the privilege of listening and, if wise, treat the knowledge so gained with intelligent disbelief. The most common qualification of the economic forecaster is not in knowing, but in not knowing that he does not know. His greatest advantage is that all predictions, right or wrong, are soon forgotten. There are too many of them, and if the elapse of the time is considerable, not only the memory of what was said will be gone, but so will an appreciable number of those making or hearing the predictions. As Keynes observed, in the long run, we are all dead. Quote unquote. If indeed economic knowledge were impeccable, the economic system as it now exists in the non-socialist world would not survive.
Just a
Sir,
second.
yes, sir.
By the way, just in context, yesterday I was watching an interview on TV. I'll spell it out also. Najam Sethi was being interviewed by Karan Thapar. Okay.
Right, sir.
This line that you just threw, right? As Keynes observed, in the long run, we are all dead, right?
Exactly, sir.
That came up during that interview.
Acha, acha. Okay,
Surprisingly.
okay, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
sir.
So anyway, if you're getting tired, just give me a
No,
signal and I'll
no,
take over. Yeah.
no, sir. I am actually enjoying all these
Perfect.
lines. Yeah,
Yeah.
and also, sir, there is a line here. The most common qualification of the economic forecaster is not in knowing, but in not knowing that he does not know.
Correct. And this ties directly to the other day we were reading Sophie's World, and there was
Right, sir.
something along these lines, right? Knowing what you do
Sir,
not know, right?
sir, actually, I want a brief explanation of this sentence, sir. Can you
Yeah,
please?
absolutely, no problem. So essentially, the thing is this, right? So this
Sir.
goes back to that whole epistemology and things like that, right?
Mm,
See, if you look at a 2 by 2 matrix, right? You know something, you don't know
mm,
something, right? And then
mm,
that is one axis. The other axis is you know what you know, and more importantly, you know what you do not know. Okay. And
mm,
there is one particular area which is a blind spot, they call it, which is you do not know that you do not know.
Oh, okay, sir.
Okay. So as this blind spot becomes more and more, especially as you look further into the future,
Right, sir.
that becomes your liability, basically, right? Because
Right, sir.
if you know that you do not know, you can make adjustments for that. You know what you know anyway,
Mm.
right? But
Mm.
the thing that you do not know, that you do not
Mm.
know. I know I'm sounding very ridiculous, right, when I say this,
No,
but
no,
that's
sir.
the reality.
I'm getting a clear picture as you speak.
Yeah, exactly, right? So the lack of knowledge about your ignorance is an extremely
Mm.
dangerous thing, you know?
Right, sir. Mm.
Yeah. So that is the one that he's referring to, right? So too much clarity in a very uncertain situation is an extremely dangerous
Mm.
thing, right? So
Right,
it
sir.
goes back to the same thing that Einstein said, right?
Right,
It's
sir.
good to
Right.
simplify things, but you cannot simplify things beyond what they should be simplified to, right? Because you cut
Right,
out
sir.
important details, basically, right? And if you are not
Right,
aware
sir.
that you are cutting it out, then your reality is warped, basically.
Right, sir. Now I understood why you have given Sophie's World reference.
Yeah,
This so-called materialists, they have this disease of
correct.
ignoring that blind spot.
Exactly, right? I mean, reducing something
Right, sir.
to by ignoring important things that you experience, and then
Right, sir.
reducing everything to a single entity. That, by the way, it's
Mm.
called a reductionist approach. So, if you listen to some of
Okay.
the more sort of pseudo intellectuals or intellectuals, they use this quite a bit. It's a reductionist argument, basically, right?
Oh,
It's
okay.
when you
Good,
make a
sir.
reductionist argument, what you are essentially doing is you are cutting out all the nuance from it and then reducing everything
Mm.
to two legs versus four legs kind of an approach, basically,
Mm.
right? But there's a lot of nuance in the two legs and there's a lot of nuance in the four legs.
Mm.
You know,
Right,
if
sir.
you remove everything and reduce it to the two, then it's you are painting with a very broad brush, and it doesn't give you, in most cases, what is appropriate, basically. So anyway, enough said. You got the
Right,
point,
sir.
right? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I'll
sir.
not stop you again. Go ahead, please.
No, no, sir. Please do, sir. We'll get extra points of knowledge. So, as Keynes observed, quote unquote, in the long run, we are all dead. If indeed economic knowledge were impeccable, the economic system as it now exists in the non-socialist world would not survive. Were it possible for anyone to know with precision and certainty what was going to happen to wages, interest rates, commodity prices, the performance of different firms and industries, and the prices of stocks and bonds, the one so blessed would not give or sell his information to others. Instead, he would use it himself. And in a world of uncertainty, his monopoly of certain his monopoly of certain would be supremely profitable.
Yeah, his
Soon,
monopoly of the certain. So if somebody has
of the
all this
certain.
information, yeah. So
Right,
if
right,
I
sir.
know what's the certainty, then why would I give it to anybody, right? I can make my bets.
Right, sir.
Look, the beauty of a country like US or even India nowadays is you can always borrow money to wager, right? And if you know
Mm,
with certainty that there is a state X of the world that is going to manifest, then you can make
right, sir.
enormous profits even without having a
Out of
single
it.
penny in your pocket, basically.
Correct, sir.
Yeah. So that's what he's essentially referring to.
Right, sir. We can, yeah, nothing to add, sir. Got it, got it. So, and in the world of uncertainty, his monopoly of the certain would be supremely profitable. Soon, he would be in possession of all fungible assets, while all contending with such knowledge would succumb. Perish the thought that anyone thus favored should be a socialist. Perish the thought that anyone thus favored should be a socialist. The modern economic system does, in fact, survive not because of the excellence of the work of those who forecast its future, but because of their supremely reliable commitment to error. Sir, previous two statements I couldn't understand. Sir.
Okay, okay. I know
Perish
he's
the
going in a
thought.
very convoluted. He's hitting from the backside. That's the problem. Soon he would be in
Yes.
possession of all fungible assets. Fungible means uh, think of it as a non-discriminating asset, right? So
Mm,
in the economic parlance, one of the great fungible assets is cash, right? Liquid cash,
mm,
right? Fungible
mm.
means everything can be mapped to value in terms of a currency, for example, right? So you
Right,
pick
sir.
up anything, any good that is of any worth something, some value, you can always
Mm,
estimate what the value of that is in terms of money, right? And
mm,
once it goes into the cash account, right,
mm.
it becomes like a uniform thing. It's fungible, they say, right? A dollar is a dollar. It
Okay.
doesn't matter whether it's a dollar of X or a dollar of Y, basically, right?
Right, sir.
Once it goes
Right,
into
sir.
that cash account, it's cash, right? So he or she would be in possession of all the fungible assets, while all contending with such knowledge would succumb. That means I know for certain what's going to happen. Other people are
Mm.
not; they do not know. So
They
I'm
do not
always
know.
right. So I'll end up mm, uh, accumulating all the wealth, basically, right? Which
Correct,
is
sir.
why the war for access, right? So think of the
Mm,
very rich people, let's say in India or in the US, right? The most important thing that they fight for is information, because
mm.
information reduces uncertainty, right?
Correct, sir.
And
Right, sir.
uncertainty, when reduced, gives you the edge in terms of getting the extra profit, basically.
Right, sir.
Now, where is the
It
thought
is,
that
it
anyone
is
does
like
favor should be socialist? Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
nothing, sir. It is like if we are in a casino and we are playing dice, and you know on which face the dice is going to fall in the next game,
Exactly.
in the next
Exactly. So you're always betting on the number,
number. Right, sir.
the correct number.
Correct number. Yes.
Exactly. Right. Now,
So,
where is the thought that anyone thus favored should be a socialist? So let's not even think about the fact that somebody who has all this wealth would have a socialist mindset. They will not, right? Because once you are
mm,
rich, you will never be a socialist, right?
mm.
Because what that
Right,
means
sir.
is then you have to either donate all your money for social causes, or your wealth accumulation will be capped, basically, right?
Yeah. Taxed heavily.
It it could be tax, it could be like the other day, there was one idea that came in during one of our sessions that said 30% of all the wealth from the wealthiest Indians should be taken and then it should be used for supporting the army or whatever it is, right? That's a
Right,
very
sir.
socialist thought, all right? So
Mm,
essentially, he's saying that in such a world where there is certainty, there won't be anybody who is a socialist who has that kind of information
mm.
access,
Right, sir.
right? And then the modern economic system does in fact survive not because of the excellence of the work of those who forecast its future, but because of their supremely reliable commitment to error. So essentially,
Right,
what he's
right, sir.
saying is, yeah, that the economic system is the way it is because there is there is enough chance that somebody is wrong, basically, right?
Mm,
And you see it all the time. You think that some people. So I'll give a small example and then I'll stop my rant, right? So a lot of people, when the going is good, right, whether it is in the stock market or whether it is when the GDP is increasing, right, for a country, they will think that
mm,
the human mind wants to think, the human psychology is that when the good times are going, you want to assume that they'll last forever, basically, right?
mm, mm.
But somebody who has either been in practicality through a few cycles or who is able to deduce that eventually there'll be a regression to the mean, as they say, right? So, I mean,
Mm.
there are any number of statements that are made, right? What goes up has to come down, right? If
Right,
the
sir.
going is bad, then it is the darkest before sunrise. Those kinds of statements, right? So they are like
Right, sir.
nuggets of wisdom that essentially refer to more fundamental principles of uh, what do we call some kind of a mapping over time, right?
Mm.
Uh,
Mm.
these are natural phenomena that occur where there's no such thing as the temperatures going up continuously, basically, for example, right?
Right, sir.
You
Right, sir.
talk about global warming and suddenly you get a winter where it's like extremely cold, basically, right?
Mm.
And then
Mm.
suddenly you wonder what happened, right? It's supposed to be warm, but how come it's so cold, right? So
Right, sir.
when you look at random phenomena that happen over time, you see these kinds of patterns, right? So that's what
Right,
he's
sir.
referring to. The fact that there is uncertainty is what drives, um, and not just uncertainty, but the fact that the predictions about that uncertainty are significantly prone to error, right? Is what drives
Mm.
the current economic models of the world, basically.
Okay, okay, sir.
That's what
Okay,
he's
I
saying,
got it.
right? The modern economic system does, in fact, survive not because of the excellence of the work of those who forecast its future, but because of their
Mm.
supremely reliable commitment to error, basically.
Right, sir. Right, sir.
Yeah, that's so. Anyway, SK also wanted to
And
pitch in here, so
I remember
SK, please go ahead.
as uh, from the explanation you gave, sir, I am recalling Benjamin from Animal Farm, sir.
Uh,
He will not get affected whether the animal farm rises or it declines.
mm,
He knows. Uh, I mean, he must have been through a lot and seen many phases, and he knows the rise also has a decline.
yes, exactly. Civilizations come and go. That kind of absolutely
Right,
correct. Correct.
right, sir.
You got it. So, SK, your
SKR, will
turn.
you continue or?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Which page?
Page number
Page number
13,
13 from
13th
the
first
beginning.
sentence. Yet
Okay,
there is,
13, first paragraph itself, right? Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Yet there is a redeeming possibility. We can attempt to understand the present, for the future will inevitably retain compelling aspects of what now exists. And the present, in turn, is profoundly a product of the past. As the ensuing pages will tell, what we now believe in economics has deep roots in history. Only as these are perceived, only as we view the past as regards prices and production, employment and unemployment, the distribution of income and wealth, saving, banking and investment, the nature and promise of capitalism and socialism, can the present and therewith in some slight measure the prospect be understood in any appreciable way? To what understanding these pages are addressed? But not exclusively. Not everything is to be measured by a stern utilitarian yardstick. There is or should be in these matters room for enjoyment for the sake of enjoyment. The history with which I here deal is, I like to think, interesting for its own sake. There is much about it, in both its facts and its absurdity, that may challenge and delight the curious mind. I would be sorry indeed were there no such response to these pages. A word must now be said on the nature and content of economics itself. Political economy or economics, said Alfred Marshall, the great University of Cambridge teacher, whose textbook was the light and sometimes the despair of many students of the college generations early in this history. So he's saying political economy or economics is a study of mankind in the ordinary business of life. Okay, there is a footnote. Okay, her reference is from the book Principles of Economics, 8th edition, volume 1, P1, I think. Okay. So that's what he said. Okay, it's a study of mankind in the ordinary business of life. This allows of a wide field. Not much in human behavior can be excluded as irrelevant. For practical purposes, however, the scope of inquiry and concern must be narrowed to the questions most commonly asked. And we must keep in mind that these questions change greatly in urgency with the changing context and over the passing years. Central to all economic analysis and instruction is the question of what determines the prices that are paid for goods and for services rendered, and how the proceeds from this economic activity are distributed, and what determines the share going to wages, interests, profits, and although less distinctly, the rent of land and other fixed and immutable objects used in production. Over most of the modern life of economics, these two subjects, the theory of value and the theory of distribution, have been the ultimate concern. It is still thought that economics came of age when these two matters were tackled systematically in the latter part of 18th century, most notably by Adam Smith. But here, at the very center of the subject, there has been formidable change with the changing context. In earlier times, as we shall presently see, neither the factors determining prices nor those setting the levels of wages, interest, and other distributive shares were of much relevance. With production and consumption centered on the household, there was no necessity for a theory of prices. With slaves, there was no compelling need for a theory of wages. Hmm. In very recent times, although the change has not been considered by the more scrupulously conventional economists, the importance of price determination
Scrupulously. Scrupulously.
scrupulously ante
స్క్రూప్తే జాగ్రత్తగా.
oh okay, by the more scrupulously conventional economists, the importance of price determination and of the factors setting the distributive shares has once again declined. Prices in a poor or meager society are the prices of grim essentials. The price of bread does much to determine how much people will eat. Hmm. In a generally affluent world, by contrast, if the price of bread is high, then something else of no great significance is forgone in order to pay for it. అసలు అర్థం కూడా అవ్వట్లేదు నాకు ఈ సబ్జెక్ట్. Or something else is consumed. So is he saying if the price goes high,
ఒకసారి
we'll
మళ్ళీ
find a
చదవండి.
substitute for bread?
టూ సెంటెన్సెస్ బ్యాక్ వెళ్ళి చదవండి చెప్తా.
Okay. Okay. Prices in a poor or meager society are the prices of grim essentials. The price of bread does much to determine how much people will eat. In a general affluent world, by contrast, if the price of bread
బాగా ఉన్నవాడు.
If the price of bread is high, then something else of no great significance is foregone in order to pay for it.
అంటే పూర్ ఏం ఆలోచిస్తారు,
తక్కువ తింటారు, to eat less.
ఎందుకు? బికాస్ యూ కెనాట్ అఫోర్డ్ టు బై.
Effort.
You can only buy what you can afford, right? And that includes the quantity also.
Correct.
But for the rich, వాళ్ళు ఏం చేస్తారు? వాళ్ళు సెకండ్ సెంటెన్స్ లో
something else of no great significance is foregone in order to pay for this bread.
రైట్. వాళ్ళకి ఏంటంటే దే గో బై ది ఎక్స్పీరియన్స్. అంటే మేము ఏదో స్పెషల్గా తింటున్నాము, ఈ నార్మల్ జనతా తిండి మేము తినము అనే జనతా తిండిలో ఉండే బ్యూటీ ఏదైతే ఉంటుందో, టేస్ట్ ఏదైతే ఉంటుందో, ఆ రిచ్నెస్ ఏదైతే ఉంటుందో, దట్ దే విల్ లూజ్ జస్ట్ టు షో ది వరల్డ్ దట్ దే ఆర్ ఎఫ్లెంట్ అండ్ దే కెన్ అఫోర్డ్ ఫ్యూ మోర్ థింగ్స్ ఆర్ థింగ్స్ ఆఫ్ డిఫరెంట్ వెరైటీ ఆర్ డిఫరెంట్ కైండ్. That's what it says.
Okay. Or something else is consumed. Okay. Many purchases and much.
Hang on. Hang on.
Yes.
So let me quickly explain. So there are some goods called the contra goods.
Okay.
Right. As the price increases, their consumption increases actually. Right. Because it's a status symbol, for example. Right. Like diamonds. Right. So there is a very high-end market like Rolex watches, for example. Okay, so
iPhones, sir.
so they do not necessarily follow the standard demand-supply model. Okay, because they are termed as what are known as luxury goods, basically. So depending upon the status that they signal, the luxury goods, their consumption might increase if you increase the price, basically, because now you are bringing the super affluent market into the picture, right? Or alternatively, let's say potatoes, right? So potatoes, they have found that as the income of the masses increases, technically, if it is a normal good, if your income increases, then you should consume more of it, right? But the potato consumption goes down, basically, because as a percentage of your diet, the potatoes form a lesser portion as you become more affluent, basically. So he is referring to those kinds of goods, right? So essentially saying that the consumption pattern is not the same, and it varies depending upon the economic status of that particular population or the strata.
Were you about to say something, Siksha?
No, SKR, please go on.
Okay. Many purchases and much ensuing consumption are now inconsequential. So, accordingly, as compared with past times, are the prices charged and paid. Again, the importance of seeing matters in their context. Along with what determines prices and the distributive shares go the other central questions. The first is how income distributed as wages, interests, profits, and rent is diffused or concentrated. How equitable or inequitable is the income distribution? The explanations and rationalizations of the resulting inequality over the centuries have commanded some of the greatest, or in any case, some of the most ingenious talent of the economics profession. In nearly all of the economic history, most people have been poor and a comparative few have been very rich. Accordingly, there has been a compelling need to explain why this is so. And alas, on frequent occasion, to tell why it should be so. In modern times, with rising and increasingly general affluence, the terms of this subject have greatly changed. The distribution of income remains, however, the most sensitive business with which economists deal. Next, economics is considered with what leads to better or worse economic performance in the aggregate. The earlier question was what damaged or improved the state of trade, as it was then called. The current reference is to what depresses or stimulates economic growth and what causes fluctuations, rhythmic or otherwise, in the production of goods and services. Emerging here also is the now urgent, though relatively new problem of why it is impossible in the modern economy to find useful employment for so many people who are willing to work. In the 1800s, unemployment was scarcely discussed. Only in this century has the difficulty of achieving an adequate supply of goods given way to the far greater, far more discussed difficulty of finding adequate employment for as many people as possible in the production of goods. As many people as possible in the production of goods. Along with all these questions goes consideration of the institutions that are involved in economic activity, in the production and pricing of goods and services, and the distribution of proceeds. Here enters the role of business enterprise, great and small, and of banks and central banks, and of money in its diverse forms and functions, and the special problems of international commerce, and of government and the policies it pursues, as these bear in greater or lesser measure on all of the aforementioned processes and institutions. Finally, less specifically, there is the larger political and social framework in which economic life proceeds. What of the nature and efficacy of capitalism, free enterprise, the welfare state, socialism, and communism? With these matters, it may be noted the mood of economics undergoes a rather major change. It ceases to be a dispassionate, putatively scientific subject and becomes a theater for strongly expressed argument. The most detached scholar, the most avowedly, avowedly practical business executive, the politician least subject to any confining intellectual process, all react with visible, even violent emotion. Such reaction this history will nonetheless seek to avoid. What is the footnote? Okay. Okay, there is a footnote. Okay. Yielding, not unwillingly, to my publisher and editor, I have subtitled this book A Critical History. Any competent history, as all will agree, involves criticism or, in any case, critical judgment. But I am here more than marginally concerned to identify error, and I might add to have the enjoyment that comes from doing so. Okay. All these questions, the solutions to them that are about, and the courses of action, public and private, that are urged are the subject matter of the history of economics. The obligatory starting point for any study of the history is, needless to say, in the classical world. That's the first chapter.
Wonderful.
I'm just
All
reading,
right.
but I'm not understanding. Yeah, just FYI.
Welcome to the world of economics. And I mean, you have an engineering background, so I don't know how much you have been introduced to these softer subjects, right? So to understand a subject, you need to understand its vocabulary first,
Right.
right?
Clueless.
So yeah, so this is actually one of the harder of the softer subjects, economics. Yeah, but it is concerned with everybody's life. So as he said, the history of economics is the history of the common man, and that's where it is different from the history of the history that is traditionally taught, right? Because the history of India, for example, is the history of kings, kingdoms, wars, etc., right? But if you look at the economic history, it is a history of the common people. Because what do people do when they wake up every day? They go to work or they do something, they produce goods, they consume goods, they do work, right? Not in a formal setting, even, right? So, even in an informal way, they are producing something, consuming something, right? And all that comes under the economic realm, you know. So, in that sense, it's very boring, but in that sense, it's also very critical to understand. Because, I mean, people keep saying there's no history of the common man, right? The history of the common man, or one of the aspects, is the history of economics of a country, basically, or even the world in this case. And that's what we are getting ready to study. But please ask your questions. We'll stop. We won't do more than the first chapter today. So let's discuss.
Yes, sir. Like you said, we need to understand the vocabulary of the subject first to understand more efficiently. I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
I think we should be more keen and in observation while we read or while we listen to this. I understood about that. And we have to dig deeper into the subject to understand it. The subject of economics is more like physics of science subjects, science
Correct.
students.
Yeah. See, the important thing to remember here is this is not even, yes, you're absolutely right. It's the harder of the softer subjects. Economics is, right?
There is more technicality to this.
There is a lot of technicality, and that is
lot
part
of
of the reason why a lot of people think it's like Greek and Latin, because without understanding those basic terms, the definitions and everything, it becomes very difficult when they start relating these terms to each other, right?
Yes, yes, sir.
That
Mm.
said, this is actually even more interesting because this is a history of the economics itself, basically. So he's not going to
Right, sir.
discuss any economic fundamentals. He's going to go straight to, he talked about the classical world, right? The classical world means is the
Right, sir.
pre-industrial revolution world that we are talking about, right? Or even
Yes, sir,
before
exactly. And
common era.
also,
Yeah,
sir, about this chapter, it is as the book rightly mentions its name, a history of economics. We also should have an idea about the history of the world as well, sir, to
correct.
understand. Otherwise, it will be much difficult to understand. As
Yeah,
here it
so
is mentioned in the
absolutely. So, and then we are looking at the history of philosophy almost in the other
yeah.
reading we are doing. And even more interestingly, in Lawyer Garu's channel, we are doing the Telugu reading of Arthashastra, which is also an
Arthashastra,
economics.
yes, yes, sir.
Yeah.
Right, sir.
So it's like we are drinking from all kinds of sources about similar subjects.
Right, sir.
So we'll see where we end up, but nevertheless we are picking up some very interesting topics, right? And I'll tell
Sure,
you, they
sure,
are going
sir.
to be front and center at least in the next few months because of the tariffs. And I mean, people want to analyze the impact of tariffs, right? You will
Right, sir.
not be able to understand the impact of tariffs without understanding some part of the history of economics, basically, right?
Mm.
You will see the downstream impact, but you will not understand why some of these policy decisions are being made without really getting into the details of what it's all about, basically, right? You'll hear some bits and pieces from people, right? But to get deeper, you
Right,
need
sir.
to understand some of these basics. Because by the way, tariffs have already been mentioned. International trade and tariffs. That is one of the topics that he threw into that landscape.
Yeah, yeah. Right,
Yeah.
sir.
All right. Any other questions? Commentary, Largar?
Lawyer Garu. Someone, sir, should give some.
Yeah,
Maybe he's busy, sir.
he's busy. SK Garu, any questions, comments?
Mm, this subject, I think, even if I read it in Telugu, I'll not understand.
No, it takes time. Don't assume that you'll understand every page of what you read, right? Yeah, I
Actually,
won't
sir,
understand either. Yeah, exactly.
one more thing is the as you have mentioned earlier, some words and also some sentences are very quite difficult to understand. So you have to go through them 2 or 3 times to understand or catch the
Yeah.
gist of that sentence.
Obviously, the
It looks
author has
like
a very dry sense of humor. That's the other problem, right?
right, sir.
So,
Uh,
I mean,
some sentences are contains only of 9 to 10 words, but they carry a heavy meaning inside them.
yeah.
So we have to catch them
Yeah, I
as well.
think each word we should spend some time on defining it or trying to understand, or what is the context, or why is that specific word being used in that context. Yeah.
Yeah, like they like which I do say. Yeah,
Yeah.
like this word, perish the thought that anyone thus favored should be a socialist. I could not get it the first time, but after you explained, I got it, sir. Yeah. So
Right.
someone who has the knowledge of what is about to happen, what is certain, they will wager on that particular item. So, and that fellow will never be a socialist.
Correct. Because he lose everything that
He will
he
lose
has
it.
hoarded.
Correct, sir.
Yeah, that's why I said, the other day when somebody mentioned they should take 30%, I said immediately they'll leave the country. Basically, there's no need to stay here.
Sir,
Especially at that level of
interestingly,
affluence, the entire world is like it looks uniform.
sir, interestingly, in I think yesterday's news, I think, or today's, There is a demand to charge 40% tax on IPL matches. 40% tax.
When you say
Yeah.
IPL matches, you mean ticket prices?
I don't know, sir, but maybe on the revenue they are gaining through ads or
Got
maybe
it.
everything. Yeah.
Got it. Makes sense, because they are
Yes.
making a lot of money hand over
Huge,
fist.
huge profits, sir.
Huge profits. Yeah, no doubt.
Thousands of
And
crores.
the real question is it a luxury good?
I think it is,
And
sir.
who pays the tax? Because I'll tell you this though. What businesses these days are very good at, whatever you call them, franchises, you call them whatever, they're very good at passing on any additional burden that the government puts directly to the consumers, basically.
Mm.
So how much ever tax you want to charge, right? If they want to keep their profits at a certain level from a volume standpoint, they'll increase the prices to make sure that they still get so much profit. And the government payout is again charged back to the consumers.
If the government has that money, then government can spend it on again back to the people itself, right, sir?
Yeah, totally. So the real question is, are they really going to pay it from the profits that they make, or are they going to increase the profits by passing it on to the people? That is the question.
I don't think that will be possible, sir, because they may increase the charge on the tickets or whatever, but their main revenue is from the ads and digital rights, satellite rights. I think from there, I think they will get the core of their money. That's what I'm thinking, sir. So ticket charges are not too much worthy, I think.
Okay. Cool. I think we are done.
Yeah. Sir, Shravan sir, if you are there, please give your commentary, sir.
I'm there, but there is no commentary. Maybe in the next episode we can.
Yeah. So and then we'll figure out what is the format that we want to use in the next episode, right?
Right,
And
sir.
depending upon the size of the chapter, do we want to read it all, or do we want to provide a summary? Okay.
I think this first chapter is just a brief overlook of what is about to come, sir.
Correct.
Nothing specific in this chapter. The author is just introducing the book to the reader.
Correct. Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. So to all the viewers who were watching the stream as well as who are going to watch the episode, thank you very much. If you have any comments, please do not hesitate to post them below the video. And if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do so. Thank you so much.